Hey everyone, welcome to the Marvel Legends Iceberg video. You guys are familiar with how icebergs work, so they need no introductions. But yeah, also don't mind my crappy Marvel vs. Capcom gameplay. But yeah, let's get started. Also, shout out to Uramasa Yusuke on Reddit as he is the creator of this iceberg. So yeah, go follow him there. Toy Biz was an action figure company that held the Marvel license from 1990 to 2006, as they're the ones that saved Marvel in the mid-90s because Marvel was about to go bankrupt from doing weird decisions. But yeah, Toy Biz saved Marvel by merging with it, and so that means Toy Biz basically owned Marvel, and yeah, they're responsible for making all those 90s Marvel action figures. Then in the 2000s, they changed the game with the Marvel Legends toy line. But in 2006, they lost the license to Hasbro, and for complicated reasons we'll get later on. Hasbro posts Hasbro's official online website where they sell, all their figures, and they also get convention exclusive to give fans that couldn't go to those places a chance to get them, and also some exclusive army builders. Although some people disagree with Hasbro posts, as they don't think Hasbro should be the one that directly sells the figures to consumers, but that's up to debate. Me personally, I don't really care. Marvel Legends Retro series, overall pretty cool series that have all the figures and cartridges like the old school 90s figures that are obviously based on those old school 90s cartoons, also like X-Men, Spider-Man, Fantastic Four, Iron Man, and also many more. Although they first started off as sort of cheap repaints, so they ended up eventually becoming getting being pretty good figures where they get original scopes and highly desired figures within the fan base. So the MCU figures, so at first we didn't really get that many MCU figures, but as the MCU evolved and became more famous, we started getting way more MCU figures, and they first started off not that good, but then eventually they ended up becoming pretty good with pretty good scopes and pretty good accurate faces, likeness to the actors. Although some people are kind of mad because they do when it comes to Marvel Legend waves, sometimes they separate the waves into half comics and half MCU, which not everyone's into comic stuff, and then there's some people they're not into movie stuff, so yeah, they can get kind of annoying for collectors. But yeah, pretty self-explanatory. Hasbro does a lot of live streams where they officially announce new Marvel Legends figures, which they can be kind of entertaining, or some people find them boring or whatever. The Bucky Cap mode and the Pixar Spidey Body modes are some of considered some of the best Marvel Legends when they were first initially released. But then, as time goes on, those modes have been used pretty much a lot. Like, those body modes are, there's like so many figures with those same body modes, which is kind of a meme at this point. And those modes, although they were good when they came out after 10 years, yeah, they're definitely quite outdated, but quite still nostalgic to look back at those figures with those body modes. The prices of Marvel Legends and action figures in general has increased quite a lot in recent times, for numerous reasons. If it's either inflations or some politics stuff, which I don't really want to get into. But yeah, it's kind of crazy because they went from 20 to 23 to now 25 and to now possibly $30, which is insane because 15 years ago Marvel Legends were I think $16. Yeah, times have definitely changed for the worse. Marvel Legends has done a numerous amount of exclusive figures in the past, and they're from all over the places, either Target, Walmart, GameStop, Best Buy, Disney World, Comic-Cons, the Comic-Con especially, which are, pretty cool figures, they they have very important value as the secondary marketing go for quite a lot of money. But at the same time, a bunch of old school exclusives haven't aged the best, so they're might not be that desirable. But then they make some essential characters exclusives, which is kind of BS. But oh well, it is what it is. So this is about the Marvel subreddit and Reddit, and they're quite a very good community, and that's pretty much so. Pack warmers are Marvel Legends that are not very desired, like no one wants them, so. And the fun things that usually they're like the ones that are the most common per case, so they amass like massive like 20, like targets have like 20 of those figures that no one wants, so they eventually end up going for like $2, $3, $5 in clearance. Even then no one wants them, but yeah. But in some rare occasions, a few of those peg warmers in years and years become quite sought after figures, which is kind of weird, but oh well. Deluxe figures is something that Marvel Legends has been doing for a bit of time. They're usually figures that are, figures that definitely wouldn't be possible to sell in the regular line. So they're usually, big, massive monsters like Modok or Mojo, or they're, re-release a build figure. So you don't have to, buy a build figure wave anymore. You can just get the build figure by itself, or it's just a regular size figure packed with so many accessories. As we stated earlier with the Bucky Cap and Pizza Spidey, it's common for Hasbro to reuse body molds, which sometimes it's fine. I mean, they're like a bunch of Marvel characters are just muscular men and women with like tight spandex, but at the same time after a while, I don't know, it gets quite lazy, yeah, especially with the Bucky Cap mode. Custom Marvel Legends and custom action figures as a whole is overall a pretty big and important part of the action figure community, as not every time the big companies will make figures of characters we desire, or like some of the more obscure ones, so it's up to the fans to make them. A lot of times they're pretty good, if not probably better than the official release ones. Especially it's coming for like teams of like characters that are way too obscure, or even making Marvel Legends of like characters that aren't even from Marvel. They can get pretty creative with them. HasLab is Hasbro's official crowdfunding system, or like where they produce limited edition massive figures that retailers wouldn't definitely carry. Now especially that Toys R Us isn't around, so massive figures like Galactus, Sentinel, and Ant-Man. And overall, they have been pretty successful, as people are pretty satisfied with them. But at the same time, they also face criticism. Some people say, "Oh, some of them are a bit too expensive." One of the prime examples of it is the Jaime Reyes Ghost Rider car, which people thought was way too high of a price for what that car was supposed to be. So that Ghost Rider ended up not even being crowdfunded. So yeah, I don't have any of them because I am poor. So yeah, but I can look at images of them online, also videos, but not having them, and I would never have them. So around the 2000s, when Toy Biz had the license of Marvel, of course it was the the era right before the MCU and of Marvel movies, and of course Toy Biz did make action figure lines for those movies. That includes Spider-Man, X-Men, Fantastic Four, and Hulk, which the basic toy lines were basically borderlines kind of Marvel Legends almost, but they had a bunch of gimmicks that usually wouldn't be found in Marvel Legends. But a bunch of those figures were very well detailed, and they were like a bit too crazy to be kids' toys. You definitely wouldn't see those types of toys anymore for men, aimed for kids. But yeah, there's a bunch of YouTubers that review action figures, especially Marvel Legends. They're the ones that you do all these size comparisons and compare different figures, and they talk about if the figures are worth upgrading and buying, and if they're not worth, they tell you not to buy them. So yeah, a bunch of those reviewers are pretty good. You know, the prime example is Sharmer's Prime. He's the biggest one of them. But there's also other YouTubers like Book Nice, ACBA, Dan who reviews MCU Collector, Ontario Universe, Century Productions, X-Mani 87, and so many more. But yeah, they're pretty cool guys. I really like their channels a lot. I watch their videos. Every time I'm interested in getting the Marvel Legends, yeah, I watch their reviews and see what's up with the figures. Even after I reordered the figure, I watch their reviews because I'm so excited to get the figure, and I just want to see how they are. But yeah, they're overall pretty cool guys. They even get you review samples, so they send them figures early so they can review them. So yeah, that's pretty cool of Hasbro to do. There's quite a bit of Marvel Legends bootleg figures out there, especially for characters like Spider-Man and Hulk. They're the most common when it comes to bootleg, also Venom. But bootlegs are pretty well done for the most part. They look pretty accurate and they're very easy to fall for. But of course, those figures are not as well produced as the official ones. So yeah, it's when you go on eBay and try to find those figures, it can get pretty tough to know which one's real and which ones is false. Although people speculate that a bunch of those bootlegs are not bootlegs but factory defected figures from factories, which I guess they just sell them in the secondary market. But then some of them are definitely mass-produced bootlegs, like the Hulk ones, definitely the Hulk ones. But also some of them are kind of weird because there's a Venom bootleg movie figure which comes with extra accessories that the official one didn't even release with, which is kind of insane when bootleg companies pack more accessories than than Hasbro. That's quite insane. But yeah, which I guess the bootleg figures are, if you don't really have that big of a budget, they're nice alternatives. Spider-Man Classics, which is the line that came out in the year 2000, was basically the predecessor of Marvel Legends, as they were the first time Toy Biz really did the whole Spider-Man figures with so many accessories and detailed, which eventually became Marvel Legends. Which I guess Toy Biz continued doing them, but later on they were packed with a bunch of gimmicks that sort of weren't the scope of the figure. In 2012, Marvel Legends returned with the line Return of Marvel Legends after basically Hasbro killed the line in 2009, but they eventually returned in 2012 with overall pretty well received waves. The fans were quite happy with that, Marvel Legends around that small era. And that's where the buggy cap body mode originated also. Recently, Hasbro has done this 3.75-inch Kenner tribute figures of Marvel characters, of course in the same style of the old school 1970s, 1980s Star Wars. Which fun fact, Kenner merged with Hasbro, I think, or did Kenner became Hasbro? I don't know, I forgot about that. But yeah, overall they're pretty nice figurines. They look very nice. Mint in card. When you have a big collection of them in the wall. But also loose in a display look, they also look pretty nice like that. So yeah, back in 2000s, Toy Biz did this line of 12-inch Marvel Legends figures, which those figures were basically upscale version of their normal 6-inch figures, and those icon figures were overall pretty nice figures. They were, very nicely done, and they did make a few of them. And back then, when Hasbro required the license, Hasbro did a few of them, but recently in the 2010s, Hasbro did return them and they made a handful of them. They were pretty good, but eventually that line sort of got kind of cancelled because the sales weren't doing that well, because I think one of the reasons was that they went clearance as soon as they came out, which that definitely hurt the line. But yeah, kind of shame. But although I heard the rumors that a Thanos and Captain Marvel were planned before it got cancelled. So yeah, pinless joints. So yeah, Marvel Legends as of recent been making their figures without pins, which overall is better because back with pins, the figures, those joints got pretty warped and they broke easily. But now with pinless joints, It's so much better. The figures look nicer and they're more sturdy. Although, it's kind of weird because Hasbro, Toy Biz back in the day, that made a bunch of their figures pinless, plus a bunch of different companies like Mattel with their DC Universe Classics were pinless back in the day. So it's kind of weird that Hasbro took this long to make pinless joints when a bunch of different figures, from like 20 years ago already did that. But oh well. I guess it's better late than never. I think it's sorry, I stuttered, but I guess it's better late than never. It is what it is, I guess. So recently, Marvel Legends and overall Hasbro in general have been making a bunch of their figures windowless as to save plastic, to save the environment. But the problem with that is that you can't really see the figures, so if the figures are defected, you can't really tell. Plus, figure swapping is much more easier with them being windowless. Plus, I don't know. The whole thing of doing them windowless to save the environment is already weird because you're already using cardboard as it is. So sure, it's kind of weird. Anyways, doesn't matter because they eventually went back to the plastic packaging. Yeah, the Civil War Spidey and the PS5 Spidey figures were quite controversial. I forgot which was the reason why Civil War Spidey was controversial. I think it was because it was inaccurate to the movie. Also, it came in 3-pack with 2 other characters and it was an exclusive, so it was kind of hard to get. But for the PS5 Spidey, it was kind of weird because the figure wasn't, a unique mode, so it didn't really match the unique texture of the suit from the game. Plus, it didn't really come with too many accessories. Plus, it was overcharged. So yeah, that figure was pretty disappointing overall. Which I guess the reason because I'm assuming is because it's typical Sony. They overcharge Spider-Man stuff, Spider taxes. So yeah, yeah, for some reason the Fantastic Four 2 and Spider-Man 3 basic toy line wasn't 6-inch, but rather 5-inch, even though the previous waves of those movies were 6-inch. Yeah, I'm not really sure what was the decision of that, why they did that, but they did that nonetheless. Unfortunately, a bunch of people, when they buy Marvel Legends, they steal them, they just buy it, and if they figure swap it with a figure they don't really want anymore, or a figure that sucks, then they return it to the store or online with Amazon, and the people in charge here don't really know that much about action figures, so for them it looks normal. And they get away with it. They basically steal figures. But then some people want to buy that figure, and when they get it, it's the wrong one. Yeah, it sucks. It sucks a lot. It sucks. Donkey balls. Forget 19 inches of Venom. Here we have 18 inches of Sam Raimi's Spider-Man 2. So yeah, this figure came out in 2004. It was a Spider-Man 2 figure, which this figure is infamously known for being an amazing figure. I mean, an 18-inch super articulated Spider-Man 2 action figure that has I think over 70 points of articulation. I mean, his fingers have articulation. It's just a beautiful figure, and it's highly valued in the secondary market, and it was basically predecessor to NECA's 18-inch figures. So yeah, this is definitely a holy grail I would love one day to get, but it's quite expensive in the secondary market if you want it in good conditions. But yeah, this figure is just way too beautiful. So yeah, basically scalpers are people that buy the full stock of the figures, then sells them in the secondary market for double, triple, or sometimes even quadruple the price, and then they make their profits, which sucks because sometimes us collectors would love to get those figures, but they get sold out pretty fast and we can't get them, which it's pretty unfortunate. But yeah, I mean, what could you do? Also, not scalpers, but I guess some hardcore fans that have enough money to spend buy 5 versions of the same figure, want to play with, then 2 to display in different sections of their collections, then 1 mint in card, then 1 as an extra one, and a bunch of them buy 5 or 6 for themselves. Then that leaves people like me that can only afford just 1 figure of each without being able to get one. So yeah, it sucks, but it is what it is. So yeah, back in the day, Hasbro did a bunch of variant figures or chase figures where it was basically the same figure but with different paint or different heads, which nowadays, back then if you wanted a different head of your figure, you had to rebuy the figure in twice. But back then, some of the most rarest chase figures were the Blue Wasm, Silver Luke Cage, definitely. And then one of the figures with the most variants was the Sentry, which had 4 variants for some reason. But yeah, quite sought after figure. Yeah, back then the basic 6 line of Marvel toys meant for kids were basically Marvel Legends with gimmicks, but nowadays things are depressing because the basic sections Marvel figures for kids are overall extremely cheap and pretty dull figures which look pretty generic, but yeah, I guess the state of the toy world nowadays, when action figures nowadays are targeted more to adults than kids. Hasbro has an advanced technology where they can basically scan the face of an actor, then their likeness gets translated pretty faithfully to the head sculpt of the action figure. This is most common with movie figures like MCU ones where they look pretty accurate to the actor's likeness. Plus, this technology has also been used recently with comic figures. Back in the day, Toy Biz did this line of Marvel figures called Famous Covers, which was basically a more modern version of the old school Amigo figures. Yeah, they were pretty nice Marvel dolls. Toy Biz did quite a few of them, and they also look very nice within the packaging. The packaging art is very, very charming. But yeah, those figures were pretty nice for what they were. And I guess now they're quite sought after, especially the Aunt May one, because the Aunt May one is infamously known for, looking horrible. Like, me personally, I don't find that one that creepy, but I guess a bunch of people do for some reason. But yeah. Yeah, back in the day, basically Toy Biz packed all their Marvel Legends with so many accessories. Either a massive build-a-figure piece, a comic book, a display stand, and just a billion guns or whatever. And they were pretty cheap, they're only like $12. But nowadays, Marvel Legends are 25, even some 30, and the only accessory they come is with one extra pair of hands, if even, especially the Spider-Man ones, which for some reason the newer Spider-Man waves don't come with a build-a-figure. And I guess the speculations because of Sony taxes, or I'm not sure, something weird like that. So yeah, it sucks, but yeah. So recently, Marvel Legends have been overall incorporating new types of articulation to their action figures. One of the most recent ones is the hip drops, which is basically when the hips are connected, is so they can allow the hips to have a greater range of articulation, which is most seen in Spider-Man figures. Although this has some problems because that type of style is kind of hard to do with sort of the plastic Hasbro does, and for that reason sometimes it's common for those figures to break in those areas. Also, people also disagree with them because they say that the regular Marvel Legends that don't have that piece of articulation like that in that style still have a pretty good range, so it's basically unnecessary for Hasbro to do that type of stuff when their normal figures that don't have it do it pretty well. So that's just the end of the video where we covered the first 2 levels, and then the second part we're going to cover level 3 and 4. So yeah, also this is the first time I make a video like this, like a massive video like this, where with this type of editing. So if I stutter, or I guess this video is kind of weirdly done, I guess that's the reason why. Just like baby first steps when it comes to making those types of videos. So yeah, hopefully I'll if you guys can leave in the comments below know ways I can improve upon those types of videos, like what I could do better, just let me know. But yeah, see you guys in the next video. Bye.